My gratitude to the Harrison family, Pat Riley, Coach Eric Spoelstra, the coaching staff, and the entire Heat organization. Brian Windhorst now on top of the story and with us on SportsCenter. Brian, so many questions, but we start simply. How did the Bulls beat out the rest of the NBA even without leaving the city?
Well, first off, they offered more money than the Miami Heat. That's number one. And Miami money was a factor in this deal. Dwyane Wade made that clear from the beginning of free agency. Secondly, Dwyane Wade and the Miami Heat really were at odds, and it was getting worse by the day. The acrimony was growing significantly. It got to the point where they weren't even talking to each other. Their owner, Mickey Arison, was in New York today to try to save the relationship. It was a short meeting. No progress was made. And shortly after the meeting, Dwyane Wade made it clear to the Chicago Bulls, make room for me. I'm going to come to you. The Bulls proceeded to trade off Mike Dunleavy to the Cleveland Cavs, trade off Jose Calderon to the Los Angeles Lakers, cleared the space for the type of money Dwyane Wade wanted. He had told friends in recent days, even though Denver had made him an extraordinary offer, 2 years and $52 million, the Nuggets had the most money on the table, and they had it there for the last week. He only could see himself playing in Miami or Chicago, where he is from. And that is what it came down to. And today, when Mickey Arison couldn't save it, he decided to go to Chicago.
So Wade joining the Bulls is certainly interesting, but the departure from Miami to me is far more fascinating. Let's dig into that a little bit. Why couldn't Arison save it this time? Why couldn't Pat Riley work his magic that he had done before?
Well, at the end of the day, Dwyane Wade felt like a second-class citizen in this free agency. He saw Hassan Whiteside get a meeting with the Heat right after midnight. He saw the Heat tell him to wait essentially on the runway while they went and pitched Kevin Durant. And they offered Kevin Durant a contract of $26 million a year, even though they didn't have the money. And then they came back to Dwyane and said, let's start you at $19 million. And Dwyane Wade said, number one, that's a pay cut from last year. Number two, you just told Kevin Durant you could get him 26. Why can't you get me 26? And that is where it really went south from there. But I think there's also another factor here. The Miami Heat may have gotten to the point where they decided that they did not want to go to the ends of the earth to keep Dwyane Wade. While they definitely wanted him back, they made him an extraordinary offer. I think the Heat have got to say 2 years and $40 million is not disrespectful. It was just below what his market value was. Obviously, the Bulls were offering $48 million, and the Nuggets offering even more. But the Heat may realize that this is an opportunity for them to pivot, and they're going to take an enormous PR fallout. When Dwyane Wade re-signed there in 2014, he called himself a Heat lifer. There was an entire campaign built around the Heat lifer slogan. It was a direct shot at LeBron James for leaving. And here, 2 years later, the quintessential Heat lifer is gone. However, it sets the Heat up to have massive amount of salary cap space next summer when they can possibly chase the likes of Russell Westbrook or Blake Griffin. Potentially, this enables them to move on from a 34-year-old who they got the 13 best years of his career and let him go off into the sunset in his hometown and allow them to reset next year. They would never put it that way, but I guarantee you that was one of the things they were talking about before thinking about tearing up their team to create more cap space.
I agree with you on the PR pit. You could sell it that LeBron ran off, and it looks at this point like Dwyane Wade got run off. Rondo, Jimmy Butler's there, Wade, I guess Robin Lopez. What's he join with the Bulls?
Yeah, you have a completely different looking team. Gar Forman and John Paxson said they were going to change this team, and they certainly have. I don't think the Bulls really were convinced that Dwyane was going to leave Miami really until the last 24 hours. As late as this morning, they weren't sure that Dwyane Wade seriously was going to do it, and they certainly weren't going to trade off any pieces of their team, like Mike Dunleavy, especially a rotation player, to do so. So now what you have is a team that's got a lot of star power. There's a lot of all-star appearances. You pull in Rondo and Dwyane Wade. Not only that, with Wade being a Chicago native, there's going to be a lot of excitement. However, they are not going to be a good shooting team. Jimmy Butler is not a good outside shooter from distance. Rondo isn't a shooter basically at all, and Dwyane Wade, while he's a tremendous scorer, has not shown to be a shooter. This is sort of the anti-pace and space team. They are going to be one of probably the most compact teams in the league. Robin Lopez, who they acquired, also not a shooter. So they're going to have a challenge for Fred Hoiberg, who likes to play with pace and wants to get shooters. Now they're going to have a bunch of veteran guys who don't shoot as well, but they are going to have a star-studded team.
Talked about the PR hit with Miami, and it's always easy to blame the franchise. They're the big 900-pound gorilla. But in the end, through his career. Wade took those pay cuts. That was him. That was his agent. He didn't have to do that. In the end, when we get down to here, whose hand forced whose here? Because I'm not so sure it's necessarily on the Heat.
Right. Well, at the end of the day, Dwyane agreed to those. And to go over exactly what happened, in 2010, he took a pay cut to give room, basically, for Bosh, for LeBron, Udonis Haslem, and Mike Miller. So he took a pay cut in 2010. 2014, he takes another pay cut after LeBron leaves to help them bring in Luol Deng to help stabilize the franchise. That was a year when Chris Bosh gets a $100 million contract. Dwyane Wade takes a pay cut. Then last year, he wanted a multi-year deal, ends up agreeing to a one-year contract so the Heat could chase Kevin Durant this week. He was looking toward that a year ago. So I think he also gets to the point where he's saying, I'm not taking any more discounts. And it may have been a little bit on the Heat just making an assumption that he would be willing to take what was ever left over because he'd done that 3 times before. Discounts
are one thing, disrespect something totally different. Brian Windhorst continuing the NBA's free agent fun here on SportsCenter. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Dwyane Wade likely will get his number retired still in Miami. He will. He'll likely get a statue. People like statues. But let's get the Chicago angle from Michael Wilbon. Joins us on the telephone. Michael, what value does Dwyane Wade bring to Chicago?
Well, from a basketball standpoint, that's yet to be determined at this point. From an emotional value, it's hard to calculate. It's greater than the money the Bulls are paying. And remember, the Bulls just traded away arguably the most popular athlete in this city, at least from 2008 through 2013, since Michael Jordan, when they traded away Derrick Rose. So this is, a lot of us like to say, the biggest small town in America is Chicago. And Wade will fill a void, at least emotionally. And, it'll be interesting. We'll all be asking him, the first thing I want to ask him when I talk to him is, what do you have left in the tank? And I'm sure he believes he has a lot left in the tank. He had a pretty good season last year. And so the question is, yes, from a basketball standpoint, what does he have left? How's he going to fit in with Rondo at a time where teams are acquiring three-point shooting as frantically as they can and just sort of stockpiling it? The Bulls gave away arguably their best three-point shooter, traded him away, and Mike Dunleavy, and really have a couple of three-point shooters in Mirotic and McDermott. But it's not, as Brian Windhorst just said, the kind of team stylistically that people are going to in the NBA. But that's for another day here in Chicago, where I am right now. And literally walking down the street, people are bringing out their cars. You hear about D. Wade? Here we signed D. Wade. And it's like it was 6 years ago, 8 years ago. Dwyane Wade is a Chicagoan. He has spent in past years, I don't know about the last couple, a lot of time here in the off season. You could see him around. You could see him walking around downtown. He's a Chicagoan. The first person I ever heard about Derrick Rose from after a Heat Bulls game one night, 10 years ago, was Dwyane Wade, who said, we got to go out and see this kid Rose. I think he's better than I was at that point. I mean, he's a Chicagoan. He stays in touch with what goes on here. He's a Marquette alum. People love Dwyane Wade, even though he was on the team they hated the most when Bulls were going against Miami pretty strong. He never fell out of favor here. So this is emotionally, and particularly in the absence of Derrick Rose now, a huge acquisition. If it's a PR hit in Miami, it's a PR boost here in Chicago where people are just looking at this team going, why are we going out there? What are we going to see? What are we going to support? And now you have Rondo and Wade, and people here are going to be excited about that, at least at the beginning.
Cubs have massively popular players. This is the golden era of the Blackhawks. They've never been this good or popular in the history of the city. Is it important for the Bulls to at least get in their neighborhood? Does that kind of thing play into this?
Well, they were already in the neighborhood. They were the king of the neighborhood, even though they didn't get to a final. I mean, in 2011, this city, in terms of sports pecking order, it shows you how things can change, was Bulls and Bears. The Bears went to the NFC Championship game at the end of the 2010 season into 2011 January. And that was Derrick Rose's MVP season. So the Bulls were already on top of the sort of sports pyramid in Chicago. And they were pretty high up it 2 years ago when they had a 2-1 lead and were LeBron James corner jump shot away from taking a 3-1 lead on Cleveland. They were pretty high up. And they even started, if you remember, they started last season as the Vegas #2 pick in the East. They were the the team that Vegas had slotted to play Cleveland in the Eastern Conference Finals. So it's what's happened since January when the Bulls just fell apart. The firing of Tibbs, and, subsequently now an awful season in which they missed the playoffs for the first time in a while. So they can get back there. Are they going to surpass the Cubs? I don't know. The Cubs have lost now 15 out of the last 25 games. So let's see where they're going to be, by the time we get to October. Things change incredibly quickly in any sports landscape, and particularly this one in Chicago.
It's a shocker. Dwyane Wade is the Chicago Bull. Good night, Michael Wilbon.
Miami Heat fans will not be broken by Dwyane Wade leaving if it nets Kevin Durant. But what's going to happen is a really interesting, angry turn if Riley whiffs on Durant and Wade says, well, go to hell. I'm going somewhere else. Bro. He got you 3 championships. Never mind he got you LeBron. He got you 3 championships. And your love's that conditional. And go bleep yourself, he says. Double middle fingers to all y'all. You're not giving Kevin Durant my money. No, double middle fingers, and I don't have enough room on those fingers for my rings because I got 3 of them. I got those titles. I did. 3 of them for your city. Show me something.
Dwyane Wade's the Birdman. Apparently not.
We don't know if that's how he left town. He was gracious in the letter he had. Dan Le Batard, of course, longtime columnist for the Miami Herald, works here for ESPN, his radio show. Certainly judging. That was before the signing. That was before Durant signed, but clearly had a pulse of what was going on down there in South Florida. And they do. No LeBron, no Dwyane Wade. They didn't have Durant. As Brian Windhorst said, they are completely resetting.